Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from round 9 of the Croatian Grand Chess Tour being played in Zagreb. I know you're probably expecting a game from round 10, but there is a good reason I decided to skip it and show you another game from round 9. A lot of you have been requesting it and it really is an interesting game. But before we check it out, we do have a nice photo from this game, so let's check that out. Here it is, there you have it, Magnus enjoying his crystal clear water. And the Levon deep in thought there. Also, you can see that Magnus' pen really matches Levon's shirt. We don't have a clear view of Levon's pen, but it would be really cool if it matched Carlsen's shirt. So let's just enjoy that. And I did visit the Grand Chess Tour once again today. I tried to collect the two signatures I was missing, Levon's and Wesley's. I wasn't able to collect Wesley's, but I did get one from Levon. Again, he was running. He was again very late for the game, but this time he decided to do it, as he will probably be late to the game every day. It's hard to say. And also here are some nice photos of me actually collecting the signatures, so you know that they are legit. Here's a photo of Anand giving me his signature on the board. There you have it. Also, here's a nice photo of Magnus giving me the signature. Let's just enjoy that for a second. And also here is one of Hikaru. There you have it. He's just finished giving his signature. And well, as I've uploaded all the other photos to my other social media, I will put a link to the Twitter and Instagram pages, so you can check out the other photos if you're interested in that as well. And also, I've met a lot of you today, so thank you for that. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Thank you for asking me to take a photo with you. I even received this very nice T-shirt, as you can see. Well, you can't really see it here. From two very creative subscribers, but I do have a photo of it here. So this is well, basically what's on the T-shirt. You can see the Mikhail Tal in the background. That's me holding some sort of a flaming king. There's some chess abs action going on over there. The gentleman is asking whether he should pause the video or enjoy the show. It's sort of a Prometheus theme going on, I guess. Very creative, and thank you very much for the T-shirt. And I did promise I would make a video in it, so here it is, me making the video in it. That being said, let's enjoy the game. Magnus versus Aronian. It's round 9. Let's enjoy it. With d4 by Magnus, knight to f6, c4, e6, and of course we all know what's coming. Knight f3, d5. We have the queen's gambit declined. Knight to c3 and bishop to b4 now. We have bishop to g5 by Magnus, d captures on c4, e4 now by Magnus, and now c5. And Magnus already had this position quite a few times. Well, specifically against Anand, he had it in Altibox Norway Championship, where he continued bishop captures on c4. But he also had it against Anand in the Croatian Grand Chess Tour a few rounds ago. We've covered that game. It was a really insane fighting draw. He also continued bishop captures on c4. But here he goes for a really, well, crazy line, e5. It's a very rare line, not a lot of people play it, but it is playable as Carlsen plays it, which you will see. So it seems like Levon blundered the knight here, but of course it's not the case. It's a well-known line. C captures on d4, now Levon threatening to capture the c3 knight as well. We have knight captures on d4, and now bishop captures on c3. B captures on c3, and now queen to a5, with the idea that if Magnus captures on f6, then Levon can capture on g5. So Magnus does this. We have e captures on f6, and now you don't gain anything by capturing on c3. It does seem nice. Well, you cannot block with the bishop because you lose the knight here, but you can just play king e2, and black doesn't really have compensation for the piece. There's no good way to continue the attack. So after e captures on f6, Levon captures on g5, we have queen captures on g5, f captures on g7, queen captures, and now queen to d2 by Magnus. Now the knight can move, so the queen will not be pressuring the c3 pawn. Next move, Carlsen will probably capture on c4 and then decide whether to castle immediately or maybe play something else. We have castles by Levon, and now bishop captures on c4. We have rook to d8, now preventing Magnus from castling, as e5 would win the knight here. So queen to e3, you have to move the queen first, and now bishop to d7. Knight to c6 is coming. Of course, black is hoping to get the bishop over here to this very nice diagonal. And here, there is one game where h4 was played, and a lot of other games, well, over 30 there are with kingside castle. But here, Magnus goes for queenside castle, and basically he boldly goes where no man has gone before, or woman, and it is as of this move that we have a completely new game. So Levon has to decide what to do here. Now it's a completely different character of the position. We have castles on opposite sides of the board, so it should get very sharp. So Levon continues, knight to c6. He develops the knight, prepares to bring the other rook into the game, with bishop to b3 by Magnus, preparing bishop to c2 to, well, get the bishop to a much more useful diagonal here. Bishop to e8, opening up the rook, and now knight captures on c6. With bishop captures on c6, now the bishop assumes this very nice diagonal, although there's never really any danger of capturing it. I mean, you don't really want an open g-file here for your rook. So Magnus goes h4. If you can't have the open g-file, you can have the semi-open g-file. So the idea is, of course, rook h3, followed by rook to g3, a very nice rook lift, and you've won the game. That's the idea, but of course Levon has a say in it. First, queen to f6, you get the queen away from the g-file. Now comes rook to h3, and now b5. You want to start pushing your pawns on the queen side, b4, a4, and start an attack against the white king as well. Rook to g3, check, and now king to h8. If you go king to f8, you lose the game. Just queen c5 check, and it's game over. You cannot go to the g-file. If you go here, then, well, you just get rook to g8 mate, and if you block with the queen, then it's just captures, and of course the only thing protecting the queen is the king, so just rook g8, a nice deflecting move, king captures, and you eliminate the queen, and it's game over. So after rook g3, we have king to h8 by Levon, and now comes rook to g4. Magnus now prepares rook to f4, to try and create more pressure on the king's side. With a5 by Levon, and now rook to f4 with an attack on the queen. Queen to g7, still keeping an eye on this pawn here. b4 is the idea, so if you ever capture, then queen to a1 could be kind of annoying. So Magnus decides to trade a pair of rooks. Rook captures on d8 with rook captures on d8, and now just g4. And it's really weird how no one in this position ever thought about castling queenside like Magnus did here, but it seems like his king is fairly safe, you know, he somehow makes it work. With b4, Levon also continues the attack on the queen side. And now g5 by Magnus. Of course, you don't want to capture on b4. We already mentioned that it would be quite problematic, for example, a4. And now, if you move the bishop, you don't really have a good square to move it to. If you go bishop c2, then just queen a1 check, bishop b1, and now bishop b5, and it's just rook to c8 is coming, and it's all over. So not something you want to do, but of course, who would actually capture here? I mean, I don't even know why I mentioned it. g5 by Magnus, and now trading queens here, not all that great, because after captures, white can capture on f7, and yes, the material on the board is equal for the moment, but Magnus has 2 pawn islands, Levon has 4 pawn islands, and if anyone can make it work, it's well, Magnus. Bishop to c2, if comes, then there will be a lot of pressure against the h7 pawn, could be very dangerous. So here, after g5, we have b captures on c3 by Levon, and now bishop to c2. As planned, just getting the bishop to a more useful diagonal with bishop to d5, now attacking the a2 pawn, and now just rook to f6. Here, Magnus says, okay, you capture on a2, I'm gonna capture on c3, as now the queen no longer guards the c3 pawn. So first, queen to f8 by Levon. Now comes queen captures on c3, and now what's the plan here? Why did Levon allow this? He played queen to f8, and he allowed this beautiful diagonal to belong to Carlsen's queen, and now you have so many nasty discoveries being threatened. For example, if you play something silly like bishop captures on a2, rook captures on f7, check wins the game. You either win the queen or you block, and then of course it's checkmate. So not something you want to do. So what do you do here? How do you defend this position with black? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Magnus is attacking you. Try and defend this position while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you have just repelled an attack by world champion Magnus Carlsen. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook to c8 is the strongest idea. Just attack white's queen. If you tried queen b4, it's also possible, but not all that great. White will just trade here, captures, a captures, and rook captures on f7, and you don't get to capture on a2 because your h7 pawn is hanging. And you don't really have a good way to defend it. You have to play something like h5, then comes g captures on h6 en passant, and after bishop captures here, you will get rook to b7 going after this pawn, and it will be, well, just a much better position for white, if not winning. Probably winning, but you know, you still have to work for it. So after queen captures on c3, we have rook to c8, the strongest move by Levon. And now, how do you play this? If you trade everything here now, it's a bit different. For example, rook captures on f7 with check. You get rook captures on c3. Yes, you get this with check, but now king to g7. You are not capturing any more pawns. And now, well, it's actually black who has a threat. Bishop to e4 would just attack the pinned piece, and you would win material here. So you have to prevent it. Rook to f4. And now you get e5, you try and kick away the white rook somewhere away from the fourth rank. Rook to a4, defending the a2 pawn, and here black would be fine. The white rook is very passive here. And, well, even though white is slightly better, but nothing to be worried about. Here, Carlsen decides against it. He goes queen to d3 and gets the queen out of the way, and also threatens checkmate now. So Levon defends, queen to g7, and now we have f4. You can't go something like h5, h6, as the g5 pawn would be hanging. So here, f4. We have king to g8 by Levon, and now, again, what do you play here? Well, if you try something like h5, which seems nice, then you get h6, and you don't really have a good way of responding to this. You cannot capture, as the rook would be hanging, and black really wants to eliminate some pawns here. So Magnus goes king to d2. Now the bishop can freely move, but h6 nonetheless. A really beautiful move by Levon, as of course you cannot capture. So what can you do here? The problem is, if rook captures, which seems to be nice, then you get f5. And again, is the same idea. You cannot capture en passant because the rook would be hanging, and now bishop to e4 is a terrible threat. Black would be much better here. As you know, you would get crushed here. So after h6, Magnus continues with a3. He doesn't want the pawn on a2 to remain a target. With h captures on g5, f captures on g5, and now rook to c4. Just more activity to the rook, threatening to capture on h4. And now Magnus has to decide how to go about this. He decides to defend his h4 pawn, but now he gives away the e4 square to black's bishop, so bishop to e4. Levon now wants to trade more pieces. Magnus declines with bishop to b3, attacking the rook, and now rook to d4 check. You cannot attack both rook and bishop because, well, rook d3 just wins the queen. So we have king to e1, and now bishop back to f5. And now this rook is pretty much stuck there. It will be very hard to get it away from there. So Carlsen continues to push with h5. Rook to d3, attacking the queen, and now you have to save the bishop, as both the queen and the bishop are under attack. Queen to b8 check with queen to f8 blocking. If you go here with the king, then rook h6 just wins. You have to give up the queen here. So queen to f8, Magnus trades. Queen captures, rook, king captures, and now bishop to c2. Forcing the rook to move and preparing to capture on f5. We have not rook captures on a3. Levon wants the past h pawn. With bishop captures on f5, e captures on f5, and now h6, creating, well, not creating, it already was a passed pawn, but now it's a protected passed pawn. So what do you do here? If you capture on a3, it would be a terrible mistake to do because it would lose you the game. Just h7, and now you don't have a way of stopping the pawn. If rook h3, just rook h6, and now after you capture, the two pawns create a wall here against the black king. You cannot approach the pawns, and next move h8 will just win the game. So after h6, we have king to g8 by Levon. Now comes a4, not allowing it to remain a target here. And now rook to h4. Here Levon again goes for the a4 pawn, and you don't really have a good way of defending it. Well, no way at all. So Magnus just trades. Rook captures on f5, we have rook captures on a4. And now king to f2, Magnus starts bringing the king into the game. We have rook to g4, now comes king to f3, and now rook to g1. And here we have sort of a repetition. King to f2, rook to g4, king to f3, rook to g1, and after Magnus played king to f2, it was in this position that they agreed to a draw, as it, well, it basically will be a threefold repetition. They agreed to a draw because even though Magnus can win the a5 pawn, it doesn't mean much. For example, rook g4, king f3, and now, let's say after rook g1, you can capture an a5, but it doesn't matter. Here, black can just push f6, and, well, you mess up white's pawn structure, and you will easily draw this. G captures on f6, Rook f1 check, king g4, you will capture here, and there's no way to push this for a win. King g5, you can just go rook b6, you will not allow the white king to approach, and next you can just go king here, capture the pawn. Or if white prevents you, then, for example, if he doesn't allow you to reach the pawn, well, then the, the white king cannot enter the position, and you will never queen this pawn. So that's basically it. Of course, both of them know this, and after king to f2, they've agreed to a draw. So that's the game. I do hope you, sorry about that, I do hope you enjoyed that. As a lot of you have requested it, I really do hope it was a nice game. And like I said, I didn't show any games from round 10, even though it was supposed to be a really intense line and there's a lot going on here. We already showed the standings. We said that it's basically a race between Carlsen and Wesley So. 6.5 points to 6, but well, spoiler alert for those of you who don't want to know the results from round 10, I will now mention them. Well, Carlsen and Wesley drew their game from round 10, but it was I really didn't like the game. I really didn't feel like Wesley tried to create any chances with the white pieces. He basically just forced a draw, and he's probably hoping for Magnus to blunder in the last round, and then he can overtake him against someone else. He didn't really try to make his case against the leader of the tournament, so I decided it will not be a game I should make a video about, as it really wasn't interesting, at least to me, and usually I don't show the games I don't find interesting myself. And as all the other games from round 10 were also drawn, not really a lot going on in many of them, I decided, well, at least for the moment, not to show them. And I do have a special video planned for tomorrow morning before the final round of the Croatian Grand Chess Tour. My nephew faced Garry Kasparov a few days ago in a simultaneous exhibition. It was a really exciting game, and I will be very happy to show it to you, but you will have to wait for that tomorrow. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Valentin Dikongu for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice event, checking up on your suggestions, and, well, whatever we do here, the usual. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.